I think that what Candace Owens is doing right now is evil. Because
like, I didn't opine on whether it's evil or not, but my position is it's really none of my business. And
why is it? But I have a question. Why is it none of your business? I mean, you comment on these things for a living.
I'm not mother of the internet.
For Megyn to sit there on the stage and say, I don't opine on whether it's evil or not. But Megyn, that's all you do is opine on whether people are doing things that are evil or not. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Denise. I saw something recently that just sat so badly with me that I knew I had to make a video about it. And I wrung my hands and I wondered, should I don't know. But you know what? I cannot condemn somebody for not addressing something if I then don't do it either. So over the weekend, I saw Megyn Kelly refuse to answer questions about what Candace Owens is up to, and even feigned ignorance and said, with a flippant disregard for everything that Candace is doing, that she's not the internet's mother, so she's not going to opine on whether what Candace is doing is evil or not. I'm sorry, what do you think you do? Not the internet's mother. Yes, you are. You've taken that role on yourself by critiquing everything in politics and also more and more often discussing everything that's going on in pop culture. To pretend that she doesn't know what's going on with the Candace Owens story is to tell me that you don't know how to do your job. You have an entire staff that mines stories for you, that does the background for you, that looks for all of the details for you, and then gives you the stories. And you're trying to tell me that neither you nor anyone on staff knows anything about Candace Owens? I found it hard to believe. Now, the actual segment played like this.
I think that what Candace Owens is doing right now is evil. It is evil what she is doing right now. Okay, and I say that again.
But what?
Because
like, I didn't opine on whether it's evil or not, but my position is it's really none of my business. And
why is it? But I have a question. Why is it none of your business? I mean, you comment on these things for a living.
I'm not mother of the internet.
No, but if this were on the left and somebody were accusing Charlie Kirk of his wife having murdered him, I assume that you would be talking about it.
Is that what Candace is accusing Erica of?
Yes.
Of murdering her own husband?
She's accusing TPUSA insiders and other members of the right wing, including Seth Dillon, of being involved in the murder of Charlie Kirk, yes.
Okay. Like I said, I don't take in that content, which is an honest statement. I don't have time to watch Candace's show.
I believe you. But the point that I'm making is that
what I understand
friendship
Candace
should not, in our business, I think it's important. Listen, friendship should not trump.
We don't even know each other.
I understand, but even with Tucker, friendship should not trump our manifest requirement to speak out when people do and say things that are both detrimental to conservatism and morally wrong.
Okay.
A person could say that Ben Shapiro overstepped by saying that Candace Owens had said Erica Kirk had anything to do with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, because Candace has been very careful not to say that. She has been very careful not to let the words fall from her mouth that Erica Kirk had anything to do with the assassination of her husband. However, what she has said with extensive clarity is that in her belief, everybody betrayed Charlie Kirk. Everybody close to him betrayed him. Then she said that everybody at TPUSA was suspect, and that in her belief, they all acted suspiciously and they all had something to do with his untimely demise. Erica Kirk is the head of TPUSA, and she was obviously the closest person to Charlie. So if everybody close to him betrayed him and everyone at TPUSA is suspect, I mean, I'm not supposed to draw a correlation between what you're saying and the reality you're living in? Candace Owens is a person who can connect dots that aren't even in the same universe. And so for her to be shocked and chagrined that anybody would ever make the assumption that she had maligned Erica Kirk, to be so frustrated with people's misrepresentation of what she says that she'd have a whole segment on her show in which she irritatingly addresses all the super chats and all the comments and all the tweets aimed at her about addressing Erica Kirk directly. I don't even know what you guys are talking about. Everybody keeps coming to me and asking me about, like, why don't I say anything against Erica Kirk? Why would I? Why do you guys keep asking me that? When she decides to lie, I'll come after her, okay? But she hasn't lied yet. I mean, what do you guys want me to say? I'm, like, really confused as to why you keep bringing her up.
What is there for me to address? She hasn't sat down for a long interview. I see the innuendo that is online. I am interested in investigating who killed Charlie Kirk. What lie has Erica told that I'm supposed to be focused on? Okay, like, has she said something about, did she come out and say, Charlie never had an issue with Israel in the end? He loved Israel to his dying breath. She hasn't done that. If she was sitting down with like Bibi Netanyahu's entourage, I might have something to say. But everything that she has done she's been having conversations with people who were actually friends with Charlie. So I feel like Erica is kind of sending a message here that she's not standing against the people that are telling the truth. If I catch her in a lie, it's a little different. But to just take an attack on her does not feel appropriate to me. I haven't seen any reason to do that.
So for her to act like she didn't just lead you to water and tell you to drink is ridiculous. Ben Shapiro just did her work for her and said she has blamed Erica Kirk for the death of Charlie Kirk. And then Megyn's response is ridiculous. What? She said that? What? Huh? Well, I don't opine on whether it's evil or not. I don't opine. What a flippant word to use. What a uncalled for dig at the fact that there's plenty of people who really love Charlie Kirk who are upset at Candace for trying to get ahead of a authoritative investigation and who might be throwing a wrench in the works of a legitimate investigation that will have legitimate consequences. For Megyn to act like she doesn't know what's going on is to say, I don't know what my job is. So then when Ben says, you don't think it's your job to comment on this? I'm not the internet's mom. Megyn, don't lie to yourself. That's exactly what you think you are. And the thing is that she has every right to do her job. She's a commentator. She comments on politics, and more frequently, she's been talking about pop culture. But explain to me how you aren't the internet's mom, but you have all the time in the world to go on ad nauseum about Blake Lively, ad nauseum about Meghan Markle. She's even gone so far to do a parody with Maureen Callahan about Meghan Markle's show. She can watch that shit, but she can't watch people who are having robust episodes about how there's this whole conspiracy going on that implicates the wife. I won't say it, but if you decide to get there on your own, that's where you decided to go. I didn't say it. And Megyn Kelly has nothing to say to a person who is going on and on and on about random things that make no sense, yet trying to tie all of these little pieces together to prove their narrative. This is a person who's made so many repeated mistakes in her investigation that it boggles my mind there's anybody still watching. This is a person who has claimed that Charlie has come to her in her dreams, and that one night she went to sleep and had this vision, and he came to her and told her that everybody had betrayed him. Candace Owens, do you think that Charlie Kirk, who is standing in the glory of God Almighty, in his redeemed body, in the presence of all that is holy, is going to come down and hang out with you in your bed at night in Nashville and whisper little things into your ear about how I was betrayed? And she doesn't know, but she knows that it was really Charlie in her dreams. Is it possible that you spent more than 2 months talking about an old friend of yours who was brutally murdered, and you are obsessed with linking together how he was betrayed, and that's why you had a dream? Is it possible that Charlie Kirk did not descend from on high to visit you in your dreams, when if he was going to come to Earth to have a word with anyone, it would probably be his wife? But he's going to descend from on high to go visit a friend who had a falling out with, who stopped following him on social media, so bitter was she that they'd had their falling out, whose most recent text messages of their friendship date all the way back to 2018. But when he comes to Earth, it's to hustle on over to the person who is maligning his wife and the establishment that he worked his whole life to build. She was recently on CNN.
Your basis for saying he didn't act alone is what?
I don't know, maybe the weird Fed messages that were concocted out of thin air that had no timestamp and were written like they were
were speaking in 1822, among other things. Their lack of an ability to answer any basic questions about what took place.
But do you have any proof that the messages were made up? Because that would be easily proven.
Yeah, but they didn't put timestamps on them, and Discord came out and said they didn't exist.
This was supposedly text messages, not Discord messages. It's my understanding from the indictment.
I actually did not read that they were text messages.
The indictment calls them text messages.
What would it be like the feds are like on a computer, like typing it out back and forth?
That's exactly what it is. The feds made up the text messages.
But you don't have anyone from like the FBI telling you that, or law
I have
enforcement?
leaks.
Okay.
No.
Has anyone leaked to you?
And Tyler Robinson
But has anyone said to you, even off the record, like, yeah, we faked these?
I have very strong sources everywhere on both sides.
Well, I look forward to seeing the evidence of that.
Sure.
The indictment says text messages, the way I understand it. Did you get that when you read the indictment? Gosh, she's so condescending. You know, you almost don't want to give her any credit. But credit's due, because Candace looked foolish. You know, it was very clear that she'd glossed over numerous things in her presentation to her viewers in order for her narrative to hold. This has all been playing out in such a huge way that for Megyn to sit there on the stage and say, I don't opine on whether it's evil or not. But Megyn, that's all you do is opine on whether people are doing things that are evil or not. And this is my contention to you about why this bothered me so much. There's nothing that Megyn Kelly loves more than watching somebody on the left make a moral miscalculation, a egregious misjudgment, an act of just utter foolishness. She loves to milk those stories for all they're worth, and that's her job. She is a conservative political commentator and a social commentator because she talks about pop culture all the time. I don't care if she wants to tell everybody, I heard this story, we're going to keep revisiting this, I got this new bit of information. That's what she does, and she's got a huge audience that's ready to hear it. I don't care if she wants to do that, but my problem is you have to do both sides. You cannot pick and choose. You cannot decide, well, that person's morality is in major question. We're going to do a series of episodes based on that, and they will be a continually reoccurring theme. But when my side does it, blinders, I'm just going to pretend there's no enemies on the right. You can't do that. You can't do that. How do you have any journalistic integrity if you are going to ad nauseum discuss the sins of the left, but have nothing to say for the people on the right, who, if the tables were turned, we would have a litany of shows addressing the people on the left who had done the egregious, sinful thing. Case in point, when Kamala Harris's husband was in the news, some on the right, about his abusive past with a former girlfriend, it became a foundational point to Megyn Kelly's shows during the Kamala Harris run. And she was disgusted that no one on the left would discuss it. Okay, well, I mean, valid point. If this person has an abusive spouse, it would be worth a story all around, right? But she was very self-congratulatory on the fact that she'd found the story, kept reporting on the story, and wouldn't let the story go. And was, again, repeatedly annoyed that she was the only one sounding the alarm bells that a potential abuser could be living in the White House. Okay. If somebody on the right had had an abusive spouse in the past, would she have even mentioned it? I don't know, but it wouldn't have probably been the foundation of multiple shows. Then we see the most recent scandal where Glenn Greenwald had private videos leaked of himself with a male prostitute and Glenn wearing female clothing. It was a pretty debasing video, and it made the rounds, but barely. Glenn is not a conservative. He's one of her more middle of the road, leaning towards progressivism. But he agrees to be on her show, and she's not willing to lose him as a commentator. So she never brought up anything about this. But if he had not been a contributor to her show, if he had not continually come onto her show and was a voice of the opposing side, she would have eviscerated this person. It would have been a continual reference on her show. If there had been any respectable journalist who had this leaked footage of their private life And she would have discussed it continually and wanted to look at it from all angles and wanted to talk about the morality of it and wanted to talk about his family and how did that affect the kids. And my problem isn't necessarily that she wants to protect people's private lives because they're her private lives, but her entire job and what she does for work is to comment on what's going on in the political sphere, even when that means someone's private life. In the case of Kamala Harris, she wasn't abusive to anybody. It was actually her spouse, and he had done it in a previous relationship, not to Kamala. So for her to continue to comment on that private aspect of that person's life, well, if what we're being told is to be believed, it's pretty deplorable, but she didn't have a problem discussing that part of this person's private former life. And yet, she has a commentator who comes onto her show regularly who has a pretty debauched private life, and she just decides to never speak about it in any context with any guest, not even in a defensive stance of this commentator, not even to have somebody on who would play the part of being the critical person, but she gets to play the straight man who's going to be like, yeah, well, let's not get into people's private lives. She doesn't even do that. Acted like it didn't even happen. And again, I don't have a problem with her not wanting to eviscerate people's private lives, but that's what she does if it's on the opposing side or somebody who's not helping her. So for her to sit there and tell Ben that she doesn't opine on the evilness of somebody else's actions that are in a public sphere, not even in a private sphere, is ridiculous. For her to be like, I don't consume that show. I don't have time for that. You don't have time to listen to the conspiracies of somebody who murdered somebody you knew well, who was supportive of you as your views began to evolve towards certain pressures that you were feeling in the political sphere. You don't have time to care about a former friend of his implicating his wife in his death. That doesn't interest you at all. But you and Maureen Callahan can get together to make a pretty horrible parody of Meghan Markle. And I don't say horrible because we can't make parodies about Meghan. I'm saying horrible, it wasn't funny. But we got time for that. You know, but she doesn't have time to be the internet's mom. Please, Ben, you know. And I thought Ben asked some adequate questions. Regardless of the fact that people want to come and take his literal words that Candace has implicated Erica as a lie since Candace never actually did, I don't care because that is what Candace is saying. That is the message she wanted you to get. And then when you made the connection, she wanted to call foul on you. But are we surprised? And this is my ultimate point in this video. Megyn Kelly doesn't want to call out people specifically. Later in the exchange with Ben, she calls him out for naming Tucker Carlson in his disagreements, saying that he should have disagreed with Tucker's ideas but not brought Tucker's name into it. Why? Why would we call out everybody when we know specifically who we mean? This is like when the teacher gets everyone in trouble, when it was like 2 people in the class who consistently don't do their homework, but we're all getting the homework talk. No, call out the 2 people who don't do their homework, okay? And leave the rest of us out of it. Even if Megyn wanted just to address the issues that Candace is bringing up, because it's a collective conversation, if she wanted to talk about the conversation and not the specifics, that would be great, but she doesn't even want to do that. But for those people who are still sitting at the feet of Candace, or in Megyn's case, seemingly afraid to question her, to call her out by name, for those who are still in the shadow and in the fear of Candace Owens, let me put your heart to right, okay? This is why you can't trust Candace. I have said since the beginning to people in my immediate circle that I always felt that she was just the bell to the conservative ball, that she had shown up at the right time when conservatives needed a black voice, and she entrenched herself in a group that was only too willing to throw their arms open and get somebody from the other side to be their voice, because she was a person who had progressive liberal ideas, and then when she felt that she was transgressed by those progressives, turned on them, and the conservatives were only too happy to envelop her in a warm hug and then shove her out to be the articulate voice that she can seem to be. So her star was rising because she's absolutely capable of giving a very powerful message to people who want to be told what to think. She is incredibly articulate, wonderful at storytelling. She has an amazing ability to draw people into a story and keep them interested in it. She's a phenomenal voice for whoever can get her to talk for their side. So I don't find any shock or amazement that she's become popular whatsoever. It makes total sense that she would. But when we look at who she's been over the years, it just surprises me that people are willing to settle in on the fact that she's a truth teller. I'm confused as to when that happened. There's 3 major incidents I want to talk about in her life. When she was a senior in high school in 2007, there was a group of 4 white males, one of whom was one of her good friends, who decided to leave her a series of egregious voicemails. Now, nobody has ever seen the text from these. There's never been a transcript that's been publicly available. But in the sealed documents of this case, it was said that these voicemails were filled with racial epithets, that they were death threats, and those authorities at school who heard these voicemails said they were terrible. So I can't read them to you verbatim, but that allegedly is what happened. So it took the school 6 months to finally call these boys to account. And in that time, she was so traumatized by what had happened that she was homeschooled for 6 weeks because it was too scary for her to go to school with people who would leave death threats on her phone filled with racial slurs. It was particularly offensive to her because one of her good friends had been involved. So to have a former friend involved in the worst trauma of your life, she felt that she could not face going to school. So she went home. She and her grandfather then decide that they're going to sue the school board for taking so long to deal with this. And their assumption was that it took so long because one of the white boys, they're all white, one of the white guys who aimed his ire at her was the son of the mayor. And that there were power plays involved here, and so he was going to get off scot-free because of who his dad was. She and her grandfather, together with the NAACP, sued the school board and won $37,500. So as a young, impressionable person, to find that you can sue people and receive damages for your trauma and for what you went through, it was, I think, very formative to the way she handles conflict now. Interestingly, in one of the articles I read from the time, because this was big news in her town when this happened, there's a very curious line that says, Candace Owens was arrested in October of 2007 for a separate harassment issue. But all of the documents about this case have been sealed because they involved minors. And when I went to find another source that would let me know about when she was arrested, I never was able to find it. I was never able to find any documentation that she was actually arrested for a separate harassment issue. But she and this classmate were seen in this huge screaming match that predated the hateful, hideous voicemails. Now, I don't care how difficult Candace may have been in high school. You don't call somebody and threaten death and racial slurs. So if that's really what she suffered, and it being from a former friend, that would be super traumatic, especially as a high school student. You don't have any concept on how to deal with this. So I am in no ways belittling what she experienced. I'm just saying it seemed like high drama in high school. And then to have your grandfather and the NAACP take your side and then win $37,000, that probably felt really good to go after the bullies and to actually win and to feel like people were on your side. So I really feel like this informed the way she dealt with conflict after that. Fast forward several years, she's had a couple of jobs in New York City. She dropped out of college for some funding issues, but she goes to New York. She's a intern at Vogue for a short amount of time, and then she's working at a private equity company and works her way up to be vice president of something over there. Then she stops doing that so she can start this website called 180, and she is basically going after the conservative movement in her blog. These aren't hard-hitting articles. They're things like, how big do you think Trump's male appendage actually is? We think it's probably pretty small. And, going after the Tea Party, et cetera, calling them batshit crazy. So not hard-hitting journalism by any means. But that's what she was doing for a time. And then from that, she decided to do this spin-off called Social Autopsy. And through crowdfunding, she was going to develop this service where you could screenshot anytime somebody bullied you, and they would go into this database. And then if you wanted to find somebody who was a bully, you could see if they had a profile on Social Autopsy where you could identify bullies and where ostensibly, employers could decide whether people were troublemakers or not. That was immediately descended upon as a horrific idea by both the right and the left. All political spheres saw this as problematic because we don't really need this big brother movement where you are collecting data on people so that they can then pay socially for what they said. People shouldn't be treating others terribly, but unfortunately, if you also want to have the right for free speech, you can't then have a platform that seeks to prosecute those for free speech. And also there was a doxing issue. So now that we've identified who these people are and where they work and everything, now anyone can just go and attack these people? It seemed like a terrible plan. Candace Owens is approached by someone from the progressive left, and they say, I really think you shouldn't do this. This seems like a really bad idea, and asks her to reconsider the entire project. Candace Owens is like, this is a great idea, and I don't care for your opinion on it. Shortly after, Candace Owens' personal information and the information of her friends is released to the public, and she is doxxed, and she has all these people showing up at her house, and they have her phone number and her address, etc., etc. They know where she works. She feels that her life is in grave danger. So the very website that she came up with to do that very thing to people was now being done to her. But she, through very shoddy means, decided that the person responsible for releasing her information was the progressive who had come to her and said, hey, I think it would be great if you didn't do this. That flipped her into a conservative. And so after that incident, she wanted nothing to do with the left or Democrats or anything like that. And she plugged hardcore into the idea of being a conservative. And the conservatives, who had very few black people to speak boldly for the conservative viewpoint, were only too happy to bring her along. They really wanted somebody young, somebody capable of reaching a younger demographic. And so Candace Owens was the belle of the conservative ball. She learned all the lines, she could say all the things, and she was really, really unafraid to say things that were feather ruffling. She liked to ruffle people's feathers. It made her feel powerful to evoke an emotional response from people, so she did it consistently. And she found that the right celebrated her. Donald Trump said she was great. Kanye West said he liked the way she thought. So to get somebody like Kanye West to approve of her was like the greatest dopamine hit she could ever receive. So she was going to press into whatever it was that made her feel really good about herself. So we have a person who has a pretty dramatic high school experience. Then we get somebody who will flip on her political beliefs pretty inexplicably because it is evident that she can get farther with another political narrative. And then for my last story that just makes me feel like this is not a person to trust. In 2019, this is when she's moved on to TPUSA. She is living in Sanford, Connecticut still. She is making plenty of money for herself, and she lives in a high-rise luxury apartment. This rent is $3,500 a month. And she decides that it's a dangerous place to live because there's a black mold problem. And the way to solve your problems is to sue people. This is one of multiple lawsuits she's had throughout her adult life. And maybe in another episode, we'll chronicle all of the lawsuits, although probably not. I'm not that interested. But one of them that really stood out to me was a lawsuit that she had against the high-rise building that she lived in. She said that she had black mold poisoning, that it was causing her emotional and mental and physical decay, that she was dealing with symptoms of black mold that in her estimation were going to be lifelong chronic problems. Those problems included inability to think clearly. She also listed eczema as a problem, systemic yeast infections. She had a litany of things that were caused by the black mold. She said she'd had to get laser treatments for scars on her body because of the sores that the black mold were causing, and she submitted this picture to court as proof of the black mold. Never submitted anything from a doctor or anybody who could say, yes, these symptoms that you're suffering are because of the black mold. She eventually lost this lawsuit, but not before she stayed for 6 months without paying rent and was eventually evicted. And for a person who says that the apartment they're living in is killing them, it's wild you would stay there anyway when you have enough money to pay for an apartment at $3,500 a month. Yet you would continue to stay in the place that's killing you while you wait out this lawsuit that's going on. Well, she loses because they said that she had failed to submit to her landlord any evidence that there was a problem before the problem became so large that it was going to cause her health problems. So the lease had said there are certain requirements to staying here. One of those things is as soon as there's a problem, you need to let us know so we can fix it. She'd failed to do that and then was angry that there was a problem that she'd never asked for help to fix. Additionally, she left the windows open when the air conditioning was running, etc., etc. So she had been complicit in the growing of the black mold in her own home, but she wanted it to be their fault that there was black mold. And then when she wants to submit proof that she is suffering from black mold, she doesn't submit any proof that a doctor has connected these two things. And then she wants to stay in the place that's killing her for 6 months without paying rent. I mean, this is such a dishonest person. This is not a person who knows how to tell the truth. This is a person who has had a history of being whatever anybody needed her to be in the moment to receive a paycheck. So are we surprised that she's profiting off of the death of her friend? And for Megyn Kelly to decide that whatever is going on with this extremely popular voice in the conservative space or the former conservative space, and to think that Candace Owens' deterioration from being a relatively palatable person to somebody who is spewing evil lies and making up wild stories is not a trajectory or an arc that she would care to comment on is shocking that she would have such a lapse in her journalistic integrity. If it's on the right and it's wrong, then it's still wrong. I don't care if you're conservative. If there's somebody that's telling lies, you have to say, that's not true. And it's honestly okay to say, Candace is lying to you. Not, there's these ideas, these vague concepts that seem to be in the atmosphere. Let's talk about how those not... Why don't we talk about the person who is feeding you the lies? How does it help for you to tell me there's this lie? Let's talk about the source of it. You know? But if your job is to comment on what's going on, then comment on this person who's been a historic liar, historically hysterical, historically litigious. Let's talk about that person who always has to make a mountain out of a molehill, who will connect facts that don't even mean anything, who will make up lies out of whole cloth just to sell a narrative. Did you know that she said that the NRA was a club that was created to teach black people how to use guns so they could defend themselves during Jim Crow? No, it's not. The NRA was established to teach Union soldiers how to shoot properly. It was like a sharpshooting club for the Union soldiers. Like, it wasn't to help black people with Jim Crow. But she'll just say crazy things like that. She just makes up whole lies. This is a person who got in trouble with TPUSA because she downplayed Hitler and said that he was a problematic person because he wanted to expand his ideas outside of Germany, but all he really wanted to do was make Germany a better place. What are you talking about? This is a person who tries to tell us that the Star of David is a satanic symbol. She's a clown. She can't be taken seriously at all. And for Megyn Kelly to act like it's not worthy of her commentary, that she doesn't opine on whether it's evil or not, to continually lie to people and confuse people in this already incredibly difficult place to understand information, for her to act like her job isn't to comment and to clarify and to set people straight, then what are you even doing? Why do you even have a channel if there are some things you'll be honest about and other things you pretend don't exist? Like, how do you feel good about yourself at the end of the day when you won't call out what ought to be called out, when you'll just ignore things because it's inconvenient to you and because you came up in a time when network ratings mattered? Well, the network ratings don't matter anymore. What matters is, can you hold people to account? And if that means you lose some followers, you lose some followers. And if that means people question you, they question you. But if you're going to call out Kamala Harris's husband's abusive past, but ignore the fact that you have somebody claiming that the organization that he had built is the organization that killed him, and you're not going to ask that person what they're talking about, you're not going to do at least one show on what happened to Candace, then how do you sleep at night? How do you call how do you continue to give us these little self-righteous quips about how you're a great person, you're a great journalist, people can trust you. Can we? Since you don't want to opine whether something's evil or not, and you're not the internet's mom. Well, if you're not the internet's mom, then please don't ever tell us ever again what anybody did that was dumb. Because if you can't be our internet mom and you don't feel comfortable opining on whether something's evil or not, I guess you don't really want to do your job. And that's all I have to say about that. All right, tomorrow we're going to do Jeanette McCurdy's book, I'm Glad My Mother Died. I'm going to tell it to you. It's going to be retelling. But I listened to it over the weekend, and it was so good. A bunch of you guys had told me that we needed to do that book. And I had honestly not listened to it because the title bugged me. Not because I don't think she can't be glad her mom's dead, but it seemed so clickbaity to me that I was like, I reject. But that was my fault. I listened to it, and I truly think that title is actually super, super good. And it's not clickbaity. I see why she finally got to that point. But anyway, if you'd like to hear the retelling of the I'm Glad My Mother Died, tune in tomorrow and we're going to do that. All right, see you soon. Bye.